fascinating life. And I'm going to try to keep my presentation short. I gather that, the webinar has been more driven by participants and driven by your questions. So I will try. And Ed, if I go past 10 minutes, just you have my permission to tell me to be quiet. And it is an occupational hazard. So, professors just go on and on sometimes. So I'll try to keep my remarks short. So Dr. Sammy Lee is quite significant in Korean American history because he was such a public figure. So he was born in Fresno. His family was a farming family. They had come to California about 10 years before he was born. And shortly after the annexation of Korea by the Japanese Empire, during the 1910s and 1920s, the families tried to do farming, to be farmers, but because of the alien land laws in California, they eventually had to give up those plans. So, and this is, the reason why Sammy Lee's life is so important and so significant is that he does straddle two very important periods in American history. The earlier period, American law was quite white supremacist. It was quite racist. So, I teach in comparative ethnic studies. I've been doing it for 20 years or so. And I'm a legal scholar. And I study primarily immigration rules and citizenship rules in California and in the United States. The alien land laws, passed first in 1913, with a newer version in 1920, forbade persons ineligible for citizenship for owning land. And this included all persons of Asian ancestry. So part of the reason why Sammy Lee's life is so significant, the family faced pretty significant structural racism, which caused them to abandon their original plans. His father became a shopkeeper in Los Angeles. And then as young Sammy here was going to school, in his biography, he admits himself he was not the most serious student. He didn't particularly care for school. He really liked athletics, and he really took up diving. And an Olympic diving coach saw him one day in Pasadena, decided to coach him. Right. So this is Jim Ryan was already an Olympic level coach when he took Sammy Lee under his teaching, taught him how to do acrobatic moves. And in fact, Sammy Lee was apparently amazing. One of the first American divers, not just Korean, but like American divers, to do many acrobatic things in the air before he hit the water. Here he is, you can see him on the right, as an undergraduate at Occidental College. Throughout his college years, he competed in national competitions. He became the first national diving champion of Asian ancestry in the United States. And he was well on the way to the Olympic Games, but of course, World War II prevented that. So instead of going to the Olympics during 1940 and 1944, he went to medical school. So he got a special scholarship. And this is again a very important pivot. So during a moment when many of his Japanese American friends in Southern California were being incarcerated during World War II, persons of Chinese and Korean ancestry often had new opportunities presented to them. They were not incarcerated. They had access to special scholarships that allowed them to pursue college degrees, and then in the case of Dr. Lee, medical school. He went to USC, and he went to USC under a special program through which, at the end of medical school, he would agree to be a medical officer for the U.S. Army. Again, this is unusual. Prior to the 1940s, these kinds of opportunities were typically off limits to persons of Asian ancestry. But as the United States becomes more of a world leader, it situates itself as a leader of the free world, as opposed to the communists and to the fascists. Dr. Lee's life really does take an enormous pivot. And after World War II, you can see in 1948, he does get to compete in London. He's actually one of the older Olympians. So, he's in his late 20s when he wins his first gold medal in the Olympic Games in London. And he won 2 Olympic medals during that Olympics. Throughout that entire period, his senior officers allowed him to practice, to keep diving, even though he was commissioned as an officer and serving in the U.S. Army the entire time, such that 4 years later, he becomes the first American Olympian to repeat 2 gold medal performances in back-to-back Olympics. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I had the pleasure of looking at newspaper accounts of Sammy Lee's diving performances. Apparently, they were electrifying. Right. So not only did he win gold, it wasn't even close. Yeah. The combination of acrobatics, the way he did the 3-meter platform and then the 10-meter platform. He was an amazing diver, and he had natural talent. So not only was he diving successfully for gold medals, he was also a diving coach. Yeah. He began coaching younger divers, even as he was competing in the Olympic Games. And his life is quite significant because there just aren't that many, there aren't that many Asian American men in the 1940s and 1950s who were as visible, as prominent. Some of his diving, especially in the 1950s, was televised. So, and being televised, the United States emerging from World War II, as the most powerful nation on the planet, and the biggest issue or problem in the United States was that America's communist adversaries were constantly accusing the United States of being so white supremacist and being racist, which was kind of true. I mean, like, if you looked at America in the 1940s and 1950s, American public law set many, many deeply unfortunate examples, right? So that, and this is, I think, and I'm fully aware that I'm talking mostly to teachers, and I'm talking to teachers who are teaching younger people. And I think it would be very difficult to teach younger people just how pervasive